Okay, it's 9 o'clock. You guys want to come in and have a seat? Okay, it's time to get started. As you all know, we have a guest speaker for today. Today is Mission Sunday for Western Heights. Basically, what we're trying to do is raise money for the entire year for our missions effort. Our guest speaker is Glenn Newberry. He has been with Foster's Home since 1992. He and his wife, Cheryl, they're both here. That's obvious. But anyway, I will do a more formal introduction to Glenn at the start of services. But for now, Glenn Newberry from Foster's Home.
Last night I met with the missions committee and I think some elders at Olive Garden. And we talked deeply about missions and mission work and this day over lasagna and other food. And so I think it was a vetting deal. If I survived last night, I get to speak this morning. So I survived it. I guess I passed. But Steve told me, we've been talking for months. They asked me a long time ago to come and speak. Class time is going to be about Foster's Home specifically. I think that's what you do each year. You have some certain mission highlighted. The sermon time will be about missions in general and some encouragement we'll look at from the scriptures in that. So I'm glad to have my wife with me. And Steve said just talk about your passion during class. So obviously my passion, our passion, my wife and mine, is children. I can even trace back to when that began. Back in the 1970s, when we were teenagers, the church we were at in Mesquite, at that time named Cassaview, had a joy bus ministry. And we went out, picked up kids, brought them to class Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Sundays were about a 6-hour investment, hour each way, morning and evening, then the hour or two in class and worship, maybe about a 7-hour investment. And 105 degrees or whatever. And you picked up kids, brought them to class. That event, the years we served in Joy Bus ministry changed the trajectory of our lives significantly. After that, I went to preaching school, went into pulpit ministry for a while, and then after 11 or 12 years, began working at Foster's Home. Cheryl served kids in a different arena. She served kids in the classroom and started out in 4th grade until she could move a year or two later to her dream job, which was kindergarten teacher, teaching what she called her little men and women in kindergarten. And I've gone to her class sometimes when she was teaching, and I'd take cupcakes to the kids and get in trouble for that. But she had unbelievable management of kids and unbelievable rapport. So kids are our passion. We have spent our lives working with kids, and I've been at the home 31 and a half years and love what I do. Transitioned out of the role of president 3 years ago, and I'm traveling full-time representing the home. So what I want to talk about in the class time, and I'll kind of frame it by this. I want you to understand the kind of kids we work with, what their lives are like, how they came to us, things we do with them, and maybe some things that give hope after they leave. So that's going to be kind of my format I'll go through. But I call it understanding children from hard places. That's how we tend to talk about children that need out-of-home placement. They have had hard things happen to them. They've had difficult things happen to them that have framed their lives and directed where they are. And a number of them, at this time around 50, live at Foster's Home for Children. We also have a program for 18 to 22-year-olds or 18 to 23-year-old young adults who have aged out of foster care. Generally, when somebody ages out, as the phrase is known, when they turn 18, the magical age of 18, you're an adult, not a child any longer. there are very little support sources or resources for a child who's become an adult, especially if they've been in foster care or out-of-home placement for any length of time. Most of them don't have a family to go back to. They don't have a house to go back to. They don't have any safety net underneath them. So 3 years ago, we began what's called the SOAR program, SOAR being an acronym for Safety, Ownership, Advancement, and Responsibility. We built 2 houses with 14 550 square foot, call them apartments, but they're all under one roof, where young adults can live, they can grow, they can get a job. They have to get a job or go to school or a combination of both. They can't sit and play video games on the couch. But it gives them a place to be safe. It keeps them from being homeless. It gives them some skills. We help them apply for jobs. We help them learn how to manage money, how to manage a vehicle. And so that becomes a continuum of care on top of what we do at the children's home. But I just listed some of the factors of the background of our kids. You have broken homes, you have incarceration, you have drug and alcohol addiction, you have domestic violence, you have sexual abuse, you have all these factors that produce the kids that come to places like Foster's Home and need out-of-home placement. I want to give you a different concept. I'm a counselor and I really focus on cognitive behavioral therapy, and I really focus on cognitive thoughts. If you want to change this one thought in your mind, it'll change forever the way you look at children who have difficult behaviors. If we don't ask the question or get away from asking the question, what's wrong with this child, and that translates even to adulthood, because generally when someone exhibits behavior we don't understand, the first question we'll say is, what's wrong with this person? If we reframe that to what happened to this person, or specifically what happened to this child, we have a far better lens of looking at them in a way that we're going to help them. It's not that people are broken and need fixed. It's that people have experienced difficult things in life that have shaped their lives, and they need someone to understand what happened to them so we can apply the proper care in our day and times called trauma-informed care to kids who have had things that we talked about on the last slide happen to them through no fault of their own. And so how do you work with kids who had those things happen? And we'll talk about that. But if you can change that one question in your mind from this point forward, when you work with somebody or encounter someone whose behavior you don't understand, don't look at them as broken or needing fixed. Look at them as someone who needs to be understood. And that'll completely change the way you approach ministry with someone. One of the phrases I came across a long time ago that I absolutely love is, you cannot consequence the trauma out of a child. Typically when we deal with children, especially some of us older, in the old school, the house that I grew up in, we what I call received the Bible belt if we acted out of line. Kids that come into children's homes from broken families, the last thing in the world that's going to be beneficial for them is to be punished or to receive punitive actions for what they do. That doesn't solve their trauma. That doesn't solve them processing the abuse, the neglect, the incest, the rape, the broken family that we're going to give some scenarios of the kind of families our kids come out of. What they need is someone who can help process the pain and the trauma they've suffered so that they can heal and move past that. And so that's what our program of care is about. It's not about consequencing a child. It's about helping them work through their traumas, understanding what their triggers are, understanding what their history is in terms of what's happened to them so that we can move them past that. Anytime something traumatic happens to us in life, doesn't matter what age it is, we tend to freeze developmentally at that age. We tend to stop moving forward and we get stuck at that particular time in life. And the more severe the trauma, the more stuck we are. And so what someone needs is help to be unstuck and to move maybe inches at a time. It might not be miles or months or years, but just to learn to look in the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes or the next hour. And what I found with kids, especially at Foster's Home, is they have what I call a very foreshortened sense of future. Future is something they've never had the luxury of thinking much about. You ask them what they want to be 5 or 10 years down the road, they're trying to survive that day. They're trying to make it to the next day. The idea of looking a horizon years down the road, as most of us who are well-adjusted not have had traumas like they have, we think way down the road. We think about retirement. We think about what we want to do, where we want to go, what we want to do for a career, what we want our family to look like. Kids in out-of-home placement are generally still in the fight, flight, or freeze mode. They're stuck in that trauma, and our program's designed to help move them past that. So I want to give you some scenarios that our kids have come out of. A sibling group of 9 came to us in July. This is from the application for placement, from the referring placing party. She's using the money for the home for drugs and alcohol. The home is in disarray. There's no food in the house. The family doesn't have running water. They have 1 bucket of water to bathe in. There's 1 window AC unit for the house. You can imagine this past July in Texas with that. They have a propane grill tank that they use to cook, and the mother uses cocaine. Sibling group of 9, sibling group started out as 10 that came to us. And there was an 11th child that didn't come to us because she was 16 and had already had a child. That's a lot of the similarity to the poverty and the type of situation our kids come from. They don't come from clean houses. They don't come from good neighborhoods. They don't come from families that have just had a few bumps in the road. These kids who have come out of that background, have lived through things you and I can't imagine of what a family system must be like for that to be their circumstances. And that was to them normal. That was the environment they came out of. I remember we had 2 young men came to us out of Granbury, just 10 miles from where we live in Toller. And after their mother died, she had a lot of mental health issues. She eventually died, and we went back to clean out the house and help their uncle and them settle the estate. And the house was in a situation that you can't even imagine. I remember as we cleaned it out and just shoveled things into a front end loader, there was a cat that had died in the hallway and had just dried up in the carpet in the hallway in that house. So I want you to get a feel for the things our kids have come from, especially something I'm going to show you in a little bit. It's going to be in stark contrast to this. That's one sibling group of 4, 1 sibling group of 9. Sibling group of 2 that was 3. Zane has moved around a lot between being removed multiple times from his mother, coming to foster's home multiple times, his primary home's changing, going to a kinship placement, going to his grandparents, and now coming back to foster's for the 3rd time. Zane and Allie are the 2 in the picture. Zane and Allie are close to us because their great-grandmother went to church with us in Toller for a long time till she passed away. Zane and Allie have been in care at foster's home now, I believe, for the 3rd time. They came back to us about 4 months ago. These pictures were taken, the ones on the left of each of them were taken younger. When I did graduate work in counseling, as my dad would say, I'm going to teach you something you can't learn in school. So there's a fine art of counseling called fishing. And I took Zane and Allie fishing and took their sister Neville fishing also, and was able to bond with them and enjoy times, and they love doing things like that. And by the way, this being opening weekend of deer season, for those deer hunting widows who are here and your husband may be off at the deer lease, Allie last weekend got 3 deer at the Operation Orphans deer hunt. So you can ask your husband when they get back, or your wife, as the case may be, did you get 3? Because one of the kids at foster's home got 3 deer, and we were excited for her that she got to do that. Zane and Allie's situation is they had a very dysfunctional family, as all of our kids do. Their father died by suicide when Zane was about 10 years old. Allie was about 7 years old. We took them to the funeral. I took them back later to the gravesite several months later. I didn't lose my father till I was well into my 50s. Lost my mother when I was in my 50s also. I can't imagine 10 years of age, you've lost your father. The mother's functional capacity was such that they couldn't stay with her, so they went to kinship placements. They came to foster's home. They lived with grandmother. There was literally no place they could stay and thrive based on the broken family system for generations. And so they've come back to us for the third time. And when we get through with these, I'll talk about some trends we see in foster care, and I want to be sure and pace myself to finish. James is part of a sibling group of two. I didn't put his sister's picture up for privacy reasons. James has been removed from his biological parents multiple times for neglect due to substance abuse. The current time, it's believed to have been worse. James tested positive for meth, secondhand exposure, and the department believes that there was sexual abuse happening in the home, the victim being his older sister. He's been exposed to things that no 10-year-old should be. This came from his caseworker that placed him. James and his sister have been removed multiple times. They've been given multiple placements, foster's home twice now, kinship placements twice. And then one more scenario, and then I want to kind of tie these all together. Caitlin was previously in care due to parental drug use and parent being in jail. She was placed with her grandmother when she was young. Her grandmother passed away 6 months later. She was passed around to friends and family while her mother was in and out of jail. Her adoptive family took her in through foster care when she was 3, but she continues to struggle with attachment. Those are just some random scenarios I picked out of our kids just to give you an idea of what their lives are like. I really learned when I was preaching that we really don't understand in the church what happens in our brotherhood children's homes. So I made it my mission, 31 and a half years, to kind of relate what our kids are like and what environments they come from, so we can understand better when foster's home is announced here, when you come for a work trip. You understand innately what we do and the kind of kids we work with. A number of these kids that I talked about today, several things they had in common. Number one is they have been in multiple out-of-home placements. Typically, we probably think of a child coming to foster's home as they come from their family to foster's home, and then they either go back to their family or they stay with us till they graduate. That is an extreme minority of children who will be moved one time. Multiple, what we call disruptions or transitions, have happened in these kids' lives. Now, I don't know about your setting, and I'm not going to guess about your family situation, but I'm guessing it's a lot like mine. Home to me was 4425 Oleander Trail in Mesquite. We moved there when I was 1 year old. My older sister and younger brother, who are both single, still live in what they call the family compound. That's still home. Home to Cheryl was 2107 Luau in Mesquite, where she lived all the way through adulthood when we moved away to preach. Her parents moved away from there about 5 years ago. That was her home, one place. Grandparents the same way. Pleasant Drive in Pleasant Grove was where Ma and Pa lived. My paternal grandmother, Granny, lived in Oak Cliff, same house, same place. Get your mind around the fact of kids who come to foster's home, and I know one teenager we had a number of years ago had been in 56 placements in 2.5 years. So when we think of home, and we're thinking of home this month, in 2 weeks you'll think of going home or your kids coming home for Thanksgiving. Imagine what it's like to have had placements all throughout your childhood that there's not one place you really call home. So the concept of home to some of our kids is completely foreign from what you and I understand home or the concept to be. And so one of the things I really encourage is when you think of foster's home for children, I really want you to put the emphasis on home, because this is what they consider their home. Now, I didn't mention earlier, I should have, some that don't know. Foster's home was established by a couple with the last name of Foster. It'd been nice if they were Brown or Johnson or Green or Smith, but they had the generic name Foster that is tied to out-of-home placement. So we're named after Sherwood and Murdy Foster, who began the home in 1960. But our kids have all these transitions, all these disruptions. And in every one of them, I can tell you what they were told. We will love you, and we'll stay with you, and we'll help you succeed. And then they move to another placement and another placement. Or they go home, and then they come back to foster's home. So that's the nature of kids we have. They've been in multiple disruptions, multiple placements. Sibling groups account for 80% of our kids in care. I think we have maybe 7 kids that are there without a sibling out of the 50 we have. Sibling group placement is a commonality of what we do. We can keep kids together. Their siblings don't have to split up across the metroplex. or across a city. A lot of times they stay in the same house. If not, then they're at least on the same campus where they can visit their siblings. I was a part of a sibling group of 6. I cannot imagine the pain. Even though we sometimes didn't get along, my 3 brothers and I, we fought sometimes. I can't imagine the pain of being torn apart from your siblings in childhood and not being able to experience life with them. So we have made a priority to have sibling group care. The other trend at Foster's Home in particular, when I came in 1992, and I mentioned this last night to the committee, the average age of child in care was about 14 to 16. I did the math the other day on the current kids that we have in residence at Foster's Home. The average age, 9 years old. Mathematically, if you add up all the ages, divide them by the number of kids, the average age is 9 years old. We have some kids that are less than a year old in care. We've had some kids that come to us straight from the hospital after they're born to join their other siblings that are in care. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the nature of kids that come to Foster's Home, the things that have happened to them, some of the background stories about them, and the commonality, at least, that we share at Foster's Home and what we do. Two girls, and these girls were in care a long time ago, back in the 1990s, but they both died. Both died before the age of 35, which is also common of kids who have experienced trauma. Is their life expectancy is significantly shorter than others. Kaiser Permanente did a study about 15 years ago called the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences. I bet Rusty's familiar with that. It's a simple 10-question assessment that talks about how many adverse childhood experiences a child had or an adult had as a child as they grew up. And generally, the more adverse experiences they had, the more health issues they had, hence Kaiser Permanente, an HMO in California, and the more high blood pressure, the more diabetes, the more stroke and heart attack risk, the more comorbidities that go with other things. They found that the commonality is they had significant childhood adverse experiences. In other words, the things that happened to them as a child kind of drove their life into adulthood. And I'm probably not telling you anything you don't realize, but it's been proven by research and some longitudinal studies. And so Roxanne and Jennifer pictured were 2 of the most damaged kids we had that came into care. Their behavior was off the charts. When I first came to Foster's Home, we actually had permanent managing conservatorship of kids. And I bet our lawyer knows what that is, called PMC. It's where we're their parents. Their final place is with Foster's Home. And that means there's not, we can't discharge them to somebody else. We're their parents. Otherwise, we'd be unfit parents. So we had to deal with their behavior. It wasn't until after they left care that we found this next thing I'm going to show you. We found it when we were, show you how old it is. We found it when we were cleaning out some DOS files to make way for the Windows conversion. And that's a long time ago. Teenagers have no idea what DOS is that I'm talking about. But we found this piece of prose that Roxanne wrote, and it's literally taken from what she wrote. I didn't correct anything. This, just a minute, because you're going to listen to that, read that instead of listen to me. This, more than anything I can show you this morning, gives you a window into the life of a child who has had bad things happen to them, who has experienced trauma. In this case, I'll tell you in a minute what she experienced. This gives an insight into what their lives are like better than anything I could say. This is Roxanne's words. But I want you to see how she's viewing her life on this particular day. She got kicked out of school. She said, "Today I got kicked out of school. I did a lot of things I would not usually do. I really hate myself. All I ever do is mess up. I hate my mother too, and I don't know how to let it go. I feel all alone. I hate myself for what has happened to Jennifer. And I always ask myself, why did I let it happen to us? I wish I was a better person, one in which my parents would not be ashamed of, and one in which they could love and cherish for always. I feel as if my heart has been crushed and will never be repaired. I wish I was as strong inside as everyone thinks I am. I'm scared to sleep and scared to wake up. I feel as like if I get close to anyone, they will hurt me. So I always push away. I also feel if I don't meet a certain standard, they will leave me. So I always center the attention around me. Now there is richness in what she writes into the window of Roxanne's soul. We didn't know this, she'd even typed this one day till we found it long after she had left Foster's home. What happened, the backstory to this is she and her sister were sent by their mother to go next door and bring their father back for dinner. So they're about 5 and 6 at the time. They go next door to get their father to bring him home, tell him it's time to eat. He's over there with his friends. I don't know if they were playing cards, working on cars, or whatever. Instead of coming home, the father allows his friends to sexually assault his daughters. They go back home and tell their mother. And instead of the indignation from the mother and the protection from the mother laughs and says, well, it was your fault. So you read very clearly in Roxanne's words, she felt blame for what happened to she and Jennifer. She said, why did I let it happen to us? As though a 6-year-old has any capability of stopping a heinous sin like that. She says, I hate myself for what happened to them, and I always ask myself, why did I let it happen? So she lives with a lifetime of thinking, I'm not good enough. I wish I was a better person. I wish I could be loved and cherished for always. I feel as if I was someone in which my parents would not be ashamed of. The irony is so rich. The parents allowed the abuse, but the child lives with the blame and the consequential feelings and thoughts that go from that. Now, that's the world we live in. That's what sin does to families. And that's what sin does to children as a result of families. That's what it looks like in prose. What it looked like in behavior was off the charts defiance, opposition, no to whatever was supposed to be done. They would do the opposite. Tremendous behavioral difficulties. And at the time, I'll be honest, we probably tried to give consequences for all of those things that they did bad, all those things they did wrong. And you go back to that phrase we've learned since then, you cannot consequence the trauma out of a child. How do you consequence a child to heal from something like that? You can't. What I wish we had known, now looking back, I wish we had known the depth of the things that happened to them. We didn't know it at the time. We could have addressed those things in a much more informed way. But I especially want you to look at the last couple of sentences. I feel as like if I get close to anyone, they're going to hurt me. Why does she feel that way? Because that's what happened. You trust your dad. Your dad's going to protect you. He allows his friends to abuse you. So she learned from that, I can't trust anyone. So I push people away. I keep a distance. But on the other hand, you have this opposite feeling. I feel if I don't meet a certain standard, people will leave me. I don't want to be alone. No child wants to be alone. So I center the attention, I always center the attention around me. And here's what I would call the T-ball question. How does a child center the attention around themselves? My wife's prohibited from answering. She was a teacher. Acting out. Their behavior. Their behavior is how they communicate. More times than she could count, Cheryl told children, tell me how you feel, don't show me how you feel. Use your words, we would say. Help me understand what you're feeling. Don't show it through your actions. Try to communicate with me. So in Roxanne's life, she centered the attention around herself very well through their behavior. That's the reason I think Paul says to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 6. Let's see what we got on time. We got 14 minutes. Paul said, I think it's verse 18, flee immorality. Just this 2-word sentence, flee immorality. Implication being sexual immorality. And here's the reason he says to flee it. Every sin that a man commits is outside the body. And there's a but coming. But The immoral man sins against his own body. Now, sin is sin. Sin is a transgression of the law. Sin, I'm sure, in its punishment has no variance. Sin in its consequences varies greatly. If someone took your lunch money as a child, took my milk money, back when I was in school, 3 cents bought you a carton of milk. If somebody beat me up and took my milk money, I have no memory of it, probably wouldn't remember it months or years down the road. If someone sexually sinned against me when I was 5 years old or 10 years old, I could tell you 70 years later exactly what happened, where it was, what the air smelled like, what the person smelled like, what clothes they wore, what color the walls were, whether it was morning, noon, or evening, what day of the week it was. That would be burned into my memory. Because the nature of sexual sin, Paul says, is it is different than any other sin. That's why we run from immorality. That's why we distance ourselves as far as we can get from immorality. 1 Corinthians 6:18. Because the nature of sexual sin is it has consequences that are unlike almost any other sin. It is innately to who we are and our identity and our sense of self and our sense of worth and our value as a person. That's what sexual sin looks like to a child 10 years later. That's the kind of conflicting emotions they deal with, trying to process something she can't process. How do adults do this to kids? And in her words, because who doesn't believe their parents, it was her fault. And so she lives with a blame that was never hers to shoulder, but nonetheless, that's what she felt. I want you to look at this list. A number of years ago, back when I was president, I asked one of our therapists, I said, when you talk with kids, build me a list of what makes our kids feel safe. Because I was real curious what they would say. And I was not disappointed. I was fascinating at the list of things that our kids said make them feel safe. Some of these would be on your deal. We locked our camper door at Eisenhower State Park last night. We lock the camper door everywhere we go. So locks and alarms, I'm sure, is common to every single one of us that make us feel safe. Whether it's valid or not, whether somebody could get through, doesn't make any difference. We lock the doors. No one kills anybody. Well, you'd think that wouldn't even have to be listed. But to kids who have come out of violent histories, that makes them feel safe. Boy, the third one, there's not a man in here that's going to raise his hand and say, yeah, that was on my list. Home decor. I can't tell you the color of the walls in our house. I can't tell you how many pillows are on the bed or on the sofa. Home decor to me means very little. But you take a child who has come out of filth, bathing in one bucket of water. We had one sibling group of 3 that came from mineral wells that had a curtain across for the front door, had raw sewage ran in the front yard. Home decor gives the feeling of safety. I would never have given a second thought about the decorating of the houses on campus that our kids live in. But after seeing this, you think that doesn't change a budget consideration some to allow a house parent to do what they want to decorate a house? Look at the bottom right one on the right side, the bottom one. The smell of cleanness. Some kids they haven't smelled it enough that they put it on this list that it makes them feel safe. When they actually smelled clean, and you can smell clean because we know what dirty smells like, they told the therapist that makes them feel safe. Wow. Again, that is not going to be on any of our list of things that make us feel safe. The other things, access to family, soft and cozy things, people listening, food, light on in a room, protection from outside influences. I'll tell you another one that would especially kids wouldn't put this on there. Structure. If we went to the high school in Sherman tomorrow, 5 minutes, is that all I've got? 10 minutes. Oh, good. You gave me an anxiety attack. If we went to the high school in Sherman tomorrow and we had an assembly of the kids, We say, what is your greatest need in life? Structure is not going to make the list. Somebody telling me what to do is not going to make the list. One of the things I have been fascinated by, kids in care at Foster's home, and some of them have actually written it, is how they know and have learned they need structure. They need guidance. They need guidelines. They need rules. They need to know where the limits are. And that really coincides with Hebrews 12 a lot when writer says God disciplines us as He sees fit. He trains us by that. He gives us the boundaries to operate within, and the boundaries you don't operate within. I'm sure there's what's he, 6 years old now, a boy, our barrister's son here, our lawyer's son, who knows the boundaries of a microwave that he didn't know a couple of years ago or whenever that happened. He caught the microwave on fire. We heard the funny story last night. He's got boundaries now he didn't have before. May have had them before, but he respects them a lot better now. We need boundaries. We love those boundaries. You would think for kids, the number one on their list is going to be freedom. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. I don't want any constraints. I don't want any guidelines. I want to come and go like I want to do. Give me the keys to the car. Give me money. Give me money and give me money. A child needs boundaries. They need structure. And so a number of kids that come to us have lived in the opposite extreme, where there was no boundaries, and there were no boundaries because there was no love. There was no parental love that there should have been. So they had what some kids would think would be the ultimate nirvana, the ultimate dream life. Nobody tells you what to do. But they come to Foster's home and they say, I needed structure. So they say what gives them safety is structure. To walk in front of windows and not be afraid. This was about 8 or 10 years ago. That would be even more prevalent now with the amount of gunfire that people see. When I'm with people who try to follow God, laughter, being defended by someone. Go back to Roxanne and Jennifer's story. No one defended them. No one took their cause and advocated for them. I hope that gives you some new appreciation for things that we take for granted but are significant in a child's life. Just a brief update. One of the young men that we were very proud of, TJ, right now has the history of living at Foster's home longer than any other child. He came to us at the age of 3. His father, in a drunken rage, beat their mother to death. He went to prison. He and his brother and sister came to Foster's home. He came, lived 15 years through graduation. I wish I could tell you after graduation he turned out great. TJ made all the mistakes a young man can make after graduation. He was 18. He knew it all. He wrecked about 2 different cars. He was a mess. He was an absolute mess. And disappointment doesn't describe what he did. But he joined the Army. And I promised him and any other child when I was president, if they went in the military, I would be there when they graduated basic training. And I've never regretted doing that. I've never been moved as much as when that happened. TJ had shin splints in basic training, had to drop out of his group. But I remember he talked to me on the phone, and his words were, I'm going to finish this. And I'll be honest, at the time I thought, well, I'll believe it when I see it. He healed up, he went back, he graduated with another class in 5 minutes. In the summer of about 3 years ago, I took his house parent and another female staff member to Fort Benning, and we watched TJ graduate basic training. He's presently serving in Fort Bliss. He's a much more responsible young man, but that is kind of a longitudinal story of what Foster's home can do with a child and the benefit they get from that. Real quickly, we're going to close with a book one of our kids wrote years ago in school. He wrote it called My 3 Wishes. Jeremy, another kid close to us, is because his grandmother lived in Toller, Texas, where we live. He wrote this book of My 3 Wishes, and this is going to kind of lead into the theme of the sermon. So I want you to focus with me here, and also with Christmas coming up, this may give you some context about what we want. If I had 3 wishes, the first one would be to make all wishes come true for everyone, no matter what it is. To me, that's the best wish of all, because that would make everyone happy. My second wish would be to make all poor people have a house and all the things they need for the rest of their lifetime. His mother was homeless, lived on the banks of the Trinity River in Fort Worth with mental illness. He went to live with his grandmother. His grandmother took him in. So I'm guessing that has something to do with a reference to his mother and what he wishes she had. Third wish is for my mama, and I'm guessing, I don't know if it's his grandmother he's talking about or his birth mother. My mama to see me grow up and be a nice young man and graduate from college with a good education. Anything stand out to you of those three wishes? Any one thing stand out? Who said that? Give her the gold star. It was all about somebody else. None of that was about him. Everyone else's wishes to come true. Poor people to have a house. My mama or grandmother, whichever one he was referring to see me grow up and be proud of me. None of that, no clothes, no car, no money, no boyfriend, no girlfriend, no popularity at school, no video games, no bicycle. Nothing of a material nature, given three wishes that he put down. It was all about somebody else. And so I'm going to end with this segue to what we're going to start at. You're getting a sneak peek into the sermon time. Mission is all about us getting out of ourself into something or someone else. Mission is defined, that's how I'm going to define it from Scripture, is us getting outside of ourself to others. That's as good a working definition as I could put on it. And Jeremy, I think, hit the nail on the head when he wrote that. Western Heights in your history has given over $55,000 to Foster's Home. That doesn't count what you do through the coin banks. That doesn't count what some of you do individually. You can't put a monetary value on the prayers that you offer, on the work trips that you made to campus. Several years ago, y'all did some office doors for us. I think Dan Riddle coordinated that effort. This year, y'all sent how many? 8, 10, 20. 20 workers to campus, men and women, and they worked like bees the whole week. Our staff were extremely impressed with what they did, and if we can find enough for you to do, which is tough, given that y'all did this much, we're going to have you again this summer, or next summer. There's already talks in the way on that. But I hope 45 minutes later, I hope you have a little better understanding of Foster's Home and what you do and the blessing you are to